And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most urgent topics in the never-dull world of Indiana basketball. This is our 119th edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 511th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, April 25th, 2019. I am your host, Jared Morris. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Smart takes the shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
This time of year, the only type of news that typically generates banner moments is recruiting news, and that's no different this week. Unfortunately, we don't have a new commitment to cite as this week's reason to believe that Indiana is on track to hang banner number 6, but sometimes even a swing and a miss in recruiting can still be a good sign that player acquisition is moving in the right direction. And so that's what I'll go with this week, because Indiana swung and missed on Anthony Harris, a 4-star guard in the class of 2019, who was universally described as a tough Archie Miller style player. Harris decommitted from home state school Virginia Tech after Buzz Williams left, and by most accounts was down to Indiana and North Carolina for his final two. He ultimately chose the Tar Heels. And while that decision stung for anyone who got their hopes up about Harris becoming a Hoosier, being in the running for a player of his caliber is still somewhat significant. Because if you're going to consistently recruit top prospects with other top schools involved, it's likely you're going to hear no a lot more than you're going to hear yes. And that's not just me trying to view this latest recruiting no with crimson-colored glasses. Those who frequent the 24/7 sports message boards will be familiar with the Bill Self anecdote that Jeff Rabjohns is fond of using, in which Self said something to the effect of, quote, if you're not hearing no more than you're hearing yes, then you're going after the wrong caliber of recruit. Now, I know, cue up the obligatory TJ Gasnola references and blue chip sound drops.
Bags of cash.
Still, Darius Garland, DJ Carton, Keon Brooks, now Anthony Harris, and others, they all said no to Archie Miller. But they were worth investing time in, and it's notable that Indiana seemed in the mix until near the end with each one. And by the way, we should all prepare ourselves because the same outcome is likely with Indiana's pursuits of Lester Quinones and Trendon Watford. Still, I'm glad Archie Miller is going after them. Now, all the no's in the world don't mean anything if there aren't some important yeses along the way. And fortunately, there have been, including 2 McDonald's All-Americans from the state of Indiana, 3 other 4-star in-state prospects, and a guy in Jerome Hunter who, health willing, could end up being the best player of them all. Archie and his staff clearly still have work to do in the class of 2019, and they need to be smart about how they balance their pursuit of top 50 out-of-state prospects in the class of 2020 with the top 100 prospects sitting in their own backyard. But my point here is don't let the no's from high-quality prospects discourage you. No coach is going to win every high-profile recruiting battle he enters, or even the majority of them. But smart coaches will be undeterred and keep on making calculated investments of time and energy in the elite prospects they think they can sway who fit the type of program they're trying to build. And hopefully, before too long, Archie will get another one to say yes. Okay, now let me introduce my esteemed co-host for this week's show. To my left, he is the Jamie Lannister of Girls Youth Sports Coaching in Cincinnati. He is the president emeritus of the Robert Johnson Fan Club, and he remains everyone's favorite fun-loving bracketologist.
Well, it's been a fun week, Jared. Let me tell you, this is fun. This kind of game is fun. This was fun. All right, well, this was fun.
He is Andy Bottoms. Andy, what is your bottoms line on the last week in Indiana basketball?
Just to give people a little glimpse into me, I had to look up the Jamie Lannister thing to know what that reference was for. So that gives you just a small glimpse into what I'm aware of and not aware of. So anyway, like you said, it's kind of hard to find a whole lot right now because this is the time of year when you've got a whole lot more questions than you do answers between NBA draft, early entrants, and things like that. Which IU. I know we'll talk about the guys who put their name in, but it's not really the same as other teams in the Big Ten whose fortunes could really turn pretty dramatically on who stays and who goes in that regard. But it is interesting to start to step back and look at, where things fall in the pecking order. And Dustin Dopirak had a piece on The Athletic where he was, kind of trying to make early heads or tails of what the Big Ten is going to look like. And IU was relatively far down the list. I think just because there are a lot of questions there in the middle. Once you get past Michigan State, there's a huge tier of teams with some varying questions, some of them draft related, some of them, related to other personnel. But I do think, that's what will make this offseason an interesting one, because you got to try to figure out how all these pieces fit together and how they can, find a way to finish higher in the Big Ten than they have in the past couple of years, and ultimately make the NCAA tournament. Because I do think this is a turning point year for certain with Archie, and doesn't mean they don't make the tournament. He's not going to be back for year number 4, but it is a really interesting year without, with so many questions on the roster. And I feel like we've said that at other times and then talked ourselves into answering those questions in a positive way when it didn't actually end up being that way. So I think, like a lot of fans, I'm trying to stay realistic, but probably erring on the side of skeptical a little bit as we go through this. But still a lot of, with all the transfers out there, a handful of recruits still in the mix. I do think it'll be interesting to see how the roster shakes out, but there are some things to be excited about. I think the more that you hear about Joey Brunk and you read some of the things about that, the more that seems like that's really going to be a good piece. And I know the guys talked about that last week as well. So, reasons to be excited, reasons to have questions, reasons to be pessimistic, I think, at this point. And I think those will all be themes of the offseason, quite frankly, as we get going through here.
And to my right, he is a longtime high school basketball coach in Indiana, the founder of the Delphi Bracketology Club, and no longer is he merely the assembly call sixth man, a role he has been filling ably for the better part of 2 years now. No, after a unanimous vote among our current host, he is now an official member of the assembly call hosting crew.
RESPECT.
Absolutely, and well-deserved. He is the coach, Brian Tonsoni. Coach, it is Tonsoni time. What's on your mind?
First of all, a huge thank you to you three for asking me to do that and being willing to put up with my crazy drop lines and conversations. I emailed this to you, and for all the listeners, it's an honor. Been here for a while, from a YouTube question to a chat room moderator to now being on the show. I can't thank you enough. I think it's shows you what a program is, and this is what Indiana should be: is some people who do things the right way, fill all of their roles, and then produce a quality product. And that's my Tonsoni time. That's my wish for Indiana basketball as well as for Assembly Call. But a huge thank you, and I'm very proud to be officially a part of the show, and holistically look at Indiana basketball. That's what I'm trying to do, and I would suggest the fans to do. The recruiting is been awesome. When Archie came in, it was an inside-out approach, getting Indiana players and trying to go out and grab national players. You're going to be said no at some point, like you said in the banner moment. But as soon as the young man says no, I wish them well, and then I focus on what's next. And it's the people who decide to come to Indiana that are important, and the mix of players. As we've seen in this year's NCAA tournament, it's the mix of players accepting their roles and playing together as a team, and the trust of Archie Miller to do that. So we look at that holistically. The defensive numbers have been better in 2 years, and that was something we talked about a lot on the show. By year 3 is really when the defense gets there. So, yes, it's a little questionable heading into next year, but I think things are looking up and always positive about the direction of Indiana basketball.
All right, here's what we're going to talk about this week. We will discuss the feedback that Devonte, Al, and Justin are most likely to get from NBA teams. Then we will spend some time grading Archie Miller's second year at Indiana, just like we did last offseason. And then we'll answer your questions, including one about which Bloomington restaurant is the best one to take recruits and their families to. That should be fun. All of that coming this week on Assembly Call Radio. Before we get to all that, though, let's talk about sleep and why you need to buy your next mattress from our friends and the fellow IU grads and fans at Comfort Option. First off, they actually come to your house. Seriously, if you live in Indy or Bloomington, you can schedule Comfort Option's revolutionary in-home mattress service.
There's a van with a bed in it, and they just put the mattress together right there, and you lay on it, and you decide if you like it or not.
Right there. Plus, they don't charge you extra.
They don't charge you extra to come build the mattress at your house.
They don't. And if you don't live in Indy or Bloomington, you can still order one of their Alpha mattresses online, and they'll deliver it anywhere in the U.S. Longtime Assembly Call listener Megan Mahaffey, whose voice you've been hearing in these ad spots, she and her husband went with the Alpha Medium.
We've been really, really pleased with how the Alpha Medium has felt. I am physically sleeping better.
And Megan's husband isn't snoring anymore, which is a massive bonus. And to top it all off, Comfort Option offers a 30-90 satisfaction guarantee to make sure you love your mattress. Bottom line, they want the mattress buying experience to be more pleasant than it's ever been.
The whole thing, start to finish, went incredibly smoothly.
So go to comfortoption.com right now and either order your Alpha mattress or schedule your in-home mattress store service today. And when you do it, use the promo code ASSEMBLY to get $50 off your purchase. Again, comfortoption.com. Whether you're ready for a new mattress right now or if you need to wait until you're ready, make sure you bookmark that so it's ready. Comfortoption.com, promo code ASSEMBLY for $50 off. Get the mattress that's right for you. Don't leave your sleep to chance. It's too important.
We want you to live.
Yes, we do.
Can we get some basketball, please?
Okay, gentlemen, back to talking basketball. So, we obviously Romeo Langford declared for the NBA draft. We all expected that. Maybe not quite as expected was Devonte Green, Justin Smith, and Al Durham putting their names in. But I think we all agree with the rules, how they are, where you can do that, get feedback, even sign with an agent and still come back to school. It really makes sense for pretty much everybody to do it. So I have no problem with them, going pro. Speak up or declaring. Speak up if you do, but I'm sure that you guys agree. But we did get a question in that was basically, what feedback do you think they will get from NBA teams? Because now, as we talked about on Podcast on the Brink this week, they can now actually talk with NBA teams. So, Coach, I'll start with you. What do you think are the things that Devonte, Al, and Justin will hear about that they need to improve on, not just obviously to have better college careers, but as they're looking toward becoming professional players in a year, 2, or 3?
I believe all three will get news on the things that they will need to make Indiana better and make themselves better for Indiana, because I think those are the things that they're going to need in order to play at the next level. And I think what I'm hoping for is that all three of them get feedback that confirms what the coaching staff has been telling them. A lot of times, young people, old people, we all get in our own bubble, surrounded by our family and friends telling us what we want to hear. And sometimes the message from our mentors kind of gets stuck a little bit. And so maybe going and getting this feedback will be a breakout for – we saw Devonte break out at the end, but Justin needs to break out a little bit and advance his games. And each one has some individual. I think Devonte, it's really playmaking and defense. I think Justin is you got to be committed to playing possession by possession because the NBA is just going to be tough. And Al, he's got to be able to continue. I think his growth has been fantastic, but he's got to be a scorer and a point guard. So he's going to have to work on his ball handling because of his size. So those are the specific things. But I don't see how that hurts Indiana if they go get that and they come back with the right mindset of, I'm going to do that for Indiana, not just go out and do the things to impress scouts heading down the road.
Andy, what do you think?
Yeah, the one thing I wonder about these, and I would agree with you, I mean, the way the rules are set up, there's no reason whatsoever that guys shouldn't put their name in there. I do wonder a little bit what kind of, what's the amount of effort that goes into compiling the feedback for guys like this, as opposed to guys who are really, truly on the fence versus those who are going through the process. I don't have any way to know that.
That's what I asked Matt Dollinger that, and he wasn't really able to go into much detail on it, so I didn't get much clarity on that, but I was wondering the same thing.
Yeah, I don't really know how it works. But either way, in the absence of knowing that, I would be inclined to say, yeah, go ahead and do that. And I would echo what Coach said. Hopefully it reinforces things the coaching staff has told them. I think they each have, different areas to work on with all things that would benefit IU. I mean, they're all going to be told you got to be more consistent shooting the ball from the outside. And Al made strides in that regard quite a bit from his freshman year to his sophomore year. Devonte has been streaky, and shot selection is sometimes a part of him making and missing shots. And Justin, that was a huge, talking point for him of, how can he step out? We were at the game when he, lit it up against Michigan State from the outside, but how does that become a more prevalent and a more consistent part of his game? And I think, ball handling is going to be big, and being able to run a team with guys like Al and Devonte, because Devonte, unless he's just a lights out shooter, is not going to be a 2-guard at the next level if he is able to play just based on his size and everything else. So that becomes a little bit difficult with Finney, the incumbent point guard. So how you're able to showcase some of those things. But I think more than anything, some of it's finishing through contact, some of it's those kinds of things. But with Justin and Devonte in particular, it's really just consistency of that mentality and the way they come out. And I think that will be, if they can, sustain their maybe just short of what their, peak performances are for a good number of games, that would go a long way toward reassuring people that they could play at some kind of next level, whether that's the NBA or someplace else. I think those really, for me, are the big knocks on them. They at times both look like guys who can be world beaters and, challenge for all Big Ten type of play. And other games, they just disappear or seem to be hurting the team when they're on the floor. So that's something that's hard to, do drills for. Shooting is one thing. We talk about improving that. There's a more clear picture, I think, of how you improve a skill like that versus consistency. I don't know that there's a recipe for that, but I would imagine that those are the kinds of things that they would hear and can become a focus for them heading into the next season.
Yep. All right, coming up on the assembly call, it is time to do our annual duty of grading Indiana's head coach. Last year, the grades were pretty positive despite missing the NCAA tournament. This year, I'm guessing Archie Miller is going to get far less slack, but how much less, we will discuss. Stick with us here on the assembly call. All right. Hello to everybody watching live. We appreciate you choosing us over the NFL draft tonight. It's a better choice than Ryan made, certainly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As an Eagles fan, I'm so excited the Giants used the 6th pick on Daniel Jones. What a great move, Giants.
Oh, did they? Nice.
Yeah.
But I've never been more out of the loop on the NFL draft than I am this year. It's, I don't know, kids.
Yeah. First Iowa tight end.
To get away
first
from
Iowa
sports
tight end
after
of the first
season.
round is off the board.
There we go.
All kinds of excitement.
Okay, so clearly I'm rusty because Chad actually sent in a question. So I want to do Chad the honor of playing his audio because he's the one who asked the question about Al, Devonte, and Justin. And I was so excited I wanted it to be in the first segment, and then I totally neglected to play the audio. So here, belatedly, is Chad's audio asking that question because I thought he asked it in a funny way.
This is Chad from the Chat Mob, a longtime chatter, first-time voicemailer. My question would be, what input would you give to the guys that have put their names into the NBA draft? If you were in the shoes of these different team scouts and people, what information would you give them to bring back to IU to make them a better player? I will hang up and listen to your answer.
There we go. So an excellent question from Chad. Apologize that we're asking that we played the audio after we answered it, but I haven't been here in a couple weeks, so I'm rusty. We need to get Coach back on the controls. Things run much more smoothly.
I hate it.
Well, you did a good job. Okay, one more piece of audio that I have to play. I don't know if you saw this, Andy. I emailed it to you earlier today.
I did. Good God.
So I don't know if you guys have seen the website Cameo, but I've been having some fun with it. Because you can basically go on there and celebrities are on there and you can pay them anywhere from like $10 to like $500 to record. Like Josh Newkirk is on there. You can pay him like $15. Brett Favre is on there. You can pay him $500. And basically they'll like record a little message. So I recorded one of, let's see, do I have the Christian Watford one as an MP3 that I can play? I don't, but we have one coming with Christian Watford that I'll be using on the show coming up. But I just saw that Ethan Happ is on there, and so naturally I had to submit one for Ethan Happ. So basically, you have about 250 characters to submit your request. So you don't have a whole lot of room to like give him a script or explain the context. So basically just said, hey, Ethan, I run an Indiana basketball podcast. One of my co-hosts accused you for 4 years of traveling every time you got the basketball. And then just to give him like, I don't know, anything to use, I said, his name is Ryan. He always thinks he's right, and he's a self-proclaimed shot doctor. As you'll hear, none of that stuff ended up making it in. I was hoping maybe he could make clever use of that. But here is Ethan Happ responding via me submitting something on Cameo to Ryan's accusations that he traveled every time he got the basketball.
What's up, Ryan? Ethan here. I heard that you were a hater towards my post moves throughout my career at Wisconsin. I know that you think I traveled on basically all my possessions in the post, but I'm here to tell you that they did have me in the first half. I'm not going to lie. But, after that freshman season where I was moving my pivot foot around a little bit too much, I stopped doing it. I don't do it anymore, and I'm sorry to break the bad news, but that's not the case. The refs would have called it.
Pretty good, humble, straightforward answer from Ethan Happ. I was hoping for some fireworks, but
that's.
I think to fall back on they would have called it is a little bit
Yeah.
Right.
There were certainly some that were not called, Ethan. We appreciated how you played, but there were definitely some that weren't called. I'd
be remiss if I didn't ask where he fell on the scale of what needed to be paid in order to get that.
Ethan Happ was $35. Yeah. So that was $35 for that piece of audio. Maybe worth it. I think it was worth it.
Did you see if you could get a discount if you could make 2 consecutive free throws, or did that not? Is that not an option?
Oh man.
Joel in the chat room said Bo Borowski if he was on Cameo.
Yeah.
He'd probably screw it up and take like 7 takes though.
Yeah.
Oh man.
His voice would probably be muffled with his head up his anyway.
Yeah.
Bo Borowski.
Oh, that's funny.
I'd actually rather just pay money to yell stuff at Bo Borowski as opposed to pay for him to give audio to us for something.
I will pay $35 to be recorded yelling at Bo Borowski. That's an excellent idea.
Refs should do that.
Yeah. Make some money.
Yeah, they really should.
Maybe then they wouldn't have to work like 6 days a week to do games and cross the country back and forth.
Seriously. Okay. I was trying to.
Bengals are almost on the clock. A palpable buzz here in the Queen City. Ooh. Not really.
All right. Let's get to this. Let's talk Archie. We're gonna get rid of staff management because I don't know how the heck we're supposed to gauge how he managed his staff. Like I think that's something that you would gauge a coach on, but I don't think we can actually talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll do those 4. So we'll just go bang, bang, bang. And then we've got a question to end it too. Oh, the time, 16:07. Telling you, man, get out of the routine of doing this every week. You get rusty. But thank you, Coach, for stepping up last week when the power went out. That was crazy problem. That my power went out and Ryan's power went out within like 10 minutes of each other.
For a minute,
I thought that was going to happen to me here about 5 minutes ago.
I forgot to start the timer too until about 5 minutes, so I hope I didn't cause you too many problems.
Nah, it worked. I had just had to edit something out of the 4th segment to get it down, for the radio, but it worked. It worked. Chad says, has Ryan heard that yet? No, he has not, because I'm sure he hasn't been. I emailed it to him, but I'm sure he hasn't been checking his email. With NFL Draft.
Probably cannot be opened over Gmail, would be my guess.
I don't know. Have the people heard Ryan's excuses for why he can't open email? I feel like that's always private between us, and I feel like
I had kind of forgotten about it. But you mentioned it. Either before the show or at some point.
You're just a straight liar.
No, there have been. I believe once it was he can't open Gmail when Zoom is open, which I'm sorry, Ryan. I love you. That doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense at all. Okay, let's do this. And no, we're not getting me saying I love you, Ryan, as a drop.
Yeah, you're going to need to rethink the concept of having other people, better trained to do different pieces of the show, because then those can.
No, I want that. I say enough dumb things. They need to be brought back. I need to stand to account for the stupid things that I say.
You do know, Jared, that you've given me all of those apps for my MacBook, and I have the Ranjo or whatever it's called to make my own drops. I could probably just throw one in there every once in a while.
Hey,
so be careful.
Oh, you have Farajo too?
Yeah.
Okay, so good. So you're all set up. We just got to get Andy and Ryan ready to go. Yeah.
Haven't started using it yet on my own, but playing around with it.
It's pretty fun. Okay. Here we go. Let's get into segment number 2. Welcome back to the Assembly Call. You can find all of our content at our website, assemblycall.com. And if you ever want to participate in our unedited live broadcasts,
Chat mobbers,
or watch those replays, then check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. As Chat Mobber Chad once put it,
hearing the stuff in between, you get to know you guys a lot better.
Like the time last week when Ryan stated on the record with the recording to prove it that he is going to learn how to host.
We've kind of made it a thing where I refuse to learn how to host, but it's kind of just shtick. But like I actually have refused to learn how to host, but I should probably do that.
Hey, it doesn't take long.
At some point in this off season, I should probably learn how to do that.
I think Ryan last week, obviously, I was gone. I had a power outage. Coach, you stepped up. We had a crash course on the phone for like 10 minutes to get you ready to go. That must have shamed Ryan into being like, holy crap, I've done this for 8 years and have never hosted. And he had to desperately go to Coach for a show I was on to find a host at the last minute. It's a sad, sad state of affairs that Ryan can't be relied on yet to do that. But we have him now saying on the record that he's going to do it. You all heard it. We have the drop to prove it. So we'll see if it happens. Andy, you look skeptical that it will ever happen.
Yeah, I mean, to imply that he has said things that have all actually happened would clearly be erroneous. So
Time has proven me right on virtually everything.
False. Okay. Okay, let's talk Archie Miller, gentlemen. And, we did this last year. We did it with Tom Crean, obviously, in the offseason too. But let's grade the coach. And just, kind of a refresher last year, the criteria that we used was on-court success, culture, recruiting, program ambassadorship, and staff management. We've all agreed that, the way that a head coach manages his staff is very important. It's worth grading. We just don't think that we can do it because we're not there in practice. We're not there sitting by the bench during games. We don't know what goes on with the staff. And, Coach, I think you would agree, kind of dumb for us to sit on here and try and give him a grade for that. So that is important. But we're not going to touch on that here in what we're talking about. So we'll go on-court success, culture, recruiting, and program ambassadorship. And let's start with on-court success. And I have a note. I went back and looked at the notes from last year where I gave him a C. Andy, you gave him a C+. Ryan gave him a C. And I have a note that says, in a normal season, not making the tournament would be an F. So I kind of boxed myself into a corner there. I will say we didn't make the NCAA tournament. Obviously very disappointing. There was some progress from year 1 to year 2, ever so small as it may have been, and we did make a tournament. So I'm going to give him a D. I'm not going to give him an F because I think there was at least a little bit of progress. But, I think now as we get into year 3, you got to make the NCAA tournament. But I'm going to give him a D for on-court success just because, even though you had the good start to the season, at the end of the day, where do you end up in mid-March? And Indiana was in the NIT, not the NCAA tournament. And even with all the challenges that this team had, I still think that there were opportunities there to be better than they were. And so maybe that's harsh. I don't know. I went with a D. Coach, what are you giving Archie? We know your thoughts on Archie Miller. You love him.
Yeah, and so you got to take off those, blinders a little bit. I'd give Archie a C or a C- simply because the amount of injuries this year, I don't know that I've really witnessed a program go through, and that messes up your practice, that messes up your development, it messes up competition. And this team seemed to struggle competitively from the start even, and then you throw some of your players you relied on out of the mix. And even a guy like McRoberts was not healthy the whole year, and he was known for his competitiveness, and you could throw him in and play minutes because you knew you're going to get – the pieces weren't there for him to make the decisions. That being said, you still can't lose 12 out of 13. You got to try to find a way to right the ship there. But I think he has to get credit for a 12-2 start with the roster, with a lot of injuries even in that 12-2 start. And then I think he has to give credit for finding a way to win 6 out of 8 at the end. So that's, average, a little bit below average. And the improvements in defense, the record, and we did make a tournament. I see that as a C. That's not where Indiana basketball needs to be, but given the circumstances, I think that's the grade I'll give.
Yeah, that all makes sense. Seems pretty fair. Andy?
I'm in a similar range as Coach. I guess I'll lean C-. I think everything that he said I agree with, where you kind of had, a C is average, and that's kind of where IU averaged out. Once you take the lowest of lows and the highest of the highs that they had, they kind of were right down the middle. What kind of pushed me a little bit more toward C- is I think back to the first year, I felt like he got more out of some guys than I thought maybe was realistic coming into the season. So I think I brought this up before, like Freddy Mcswain is to me the textbook example of this. He was able to get a lot out of him by having him play a role, by putting him in a position to be successful, and really got more out of him than I think anybody really expected. McRoberts, to a certain extent, probably falls in that boat as well, though we'd seen a little bit of that with Crean. And when I look at this year, and maybe that's what, another category we should look at here is like a player development type of thing, because I think ultimately this is where it falls. So I'm kind of shoehorning it into on-court success because it's in some ways a function of player development. But I don't know. I mean, were there guys that you felt like on the roster that you got a lot more out of than you thought you would? Like, I would definitely put Mcswain in that boat from a couple years ago, but I don't know who I would put in that bucket this year. Maybe Al to a certain extent.
Al's the guy I was thinking of.
But even, I mean, he made strides for sure. But I just, to really get above and beyond out of a number of guys was something that I felt like you might be able to see more in year 2 as opposed to year 1. So that kind of pushed me a little bit on the lower end of that CC minus, but that's where I'd put it.
Maybe we should add player development because, I mean, it is part of on-court success, but it's kind of its own separate thing. So I'm down with adding that later. Okay,
right, we'll
culture.
do that for next.
Yeah, culture is the next one. I'm going to go with a C on culture. It seems like academics are in good shape. No off-court issues, certainly, so that all seems to be good. But, Coach, for me, this didn't seem like a team committed to bring its A effort game in, game out. And you obviously had the comments after the Minnesota game, which, came on the heels of some pretty poor performances. And, when you lose that many games like Indiana did, there's something that's not quite right. And to have some of the starts they had, that just kind of suggested something wasn't quite right. And it didn't seem to be a team that had a lot of camaraderie throughout the season. So, none of us know enough kind of behind the scenes stuff to really be able to get into specifics, but it's hard for me to give any more than a C just based on what I saw kind of with my own eyes. And it's not guys are getting in trouble off the court or anything like that, but just the cohesion and the game in, game out focus. We just didn't see that, and that needs to be part of the culture of IU basketball.
Yeah, the comments that I would be interested if I could ask, and you never would because it's none of our business, is what does the deal breaker comment mean after the Minnesota game? And so I give it a C minus again. This is where I'm most disappointed in Coach Miller at this point. I think, to me, if I can interpret that, and it's just a good guess, is that he came in, he had recruits from another coach. He had a 5-star player coming in. He was trying to get them to a level and work with them on a coach player level. And we all do that as coaches. What's best? How can I talk to them? Get input from the players, make it a collective thing. And I had heard early from some people in the know, and it's secondhand, that Archie was frustrated before the first game, that this team was not tough and not competing in practice. And he was looking for ways to get that going. And that's why I thought the 12-2 start was great, because he was struggling with this team as a coach. And when you're a coach and you struggle with the makeup of your team and the competitiveness of your team, it is an every practice, everyday problem. You go home wondering, what can I do to get these guys going? They're not where they need to be. They're not listening. They're not getting it done. And to be at 12-2 and then bam, the Finney injury. But I think he tried to massage the culture. And to me, the deal breaker was, no, it's going to be Archie Miller's way. We're going to run. You're going to run on a baseline for mistakes. You're going to be held accountable. And I don't care if you were here for Coach Crean, you're a 5-star. I'm going to get up in you and I'm going to hold you accountable. And I think that should have been done earlier. And maybe that's coming to a Power 5 program. Maybe that's with the 5-star trying to do too much as a coach instead of be who Archie is. And that's a guess. So that's why he would get a C minus for me, is that he needs to coach the way Archie Miller coaches. And if players don't like it, they can leave. And get to that toughness because it showed that we Indiana won 6 out of 8 after whatever the deal breaker was. That's the way Archie needs to continue, and I just wish that was done earlier in the losing streak to change the season.
I agree with all that. Andy?
Yeah, hard to follow that and bring a substantially different account of things. What I would add is if you believe, and I think as most people did, that the team's identity is going to be defined by its play on the defensive end, I do think you continue to see some improvement there. And so I think that is a positive for laying that as the groundwork of part of what your culture is. But overall, the show up consistently game to game with the same level of effort, regardless of who's on the other side of the floor, all the kinds of things that any coach would stand in front and say about culture, as we learned from Jordan Sperber this week, that's the buzzword of of every introductory press conference. That was fantastic. But that is as hokey as it can kind of sound, like that is important. And that's one of the things that we talked about so much toward the end of the Crean era is like, what's this team's identity? What are they really known for? Is it player development? Is it whatever the case may be? And I think really, other than, the more defensive mindset, I think we're still struggling to figure out, like, is that maybe that's all that it is, but is there more to it than that, and what there is there? So I agree with the off-court stuff that you mentioned, Jared, not having those kinds of incidents, not having, seemingly things in good shape academically is all positive, but to really be able to sit down after 2 years and say, like, hey, this is what we know we can expect from this team night in and night out. I don't think anybody can do that. And that, to me, is when you get to a point where culturally exactly what you're going to get.
Next up, we have recruiting. Now, I believe when we did this last year, Romeo had already committed, so that was taken into account in last year's. So we're not going to take that into account for this year's recruiting. I gave it a B. Andy, we'll let you start on this one. We landed another McDonald's All-American in-state prospect in Trace Jackson Davis, another building block that I think we all really believe in Armand Franklin. Joey Brunk really fills a need. I like that. But, then you look at some of the other ones. Evan Fitzner, that was a really important recruit that didn't deliver, and I understand what Archie was going for there, but it didn't work out. You did have some misses on guys like DJ Carton and Keon Brooks, and I know what I said in the banner moment, but still, not getting those guys, you certainly can't, get bumped up anything for not getting them. But I do think it was smart to go after them and to kind of be in it. And then, I think the big thing for me is we haven't really filled the need for outside shooting. I think Armand's going to certainly help with that, but it still feels like there's a glaring need there with this program needing more shooting, and that hasn't yet been addressed. Now, look, maybe Jerome Hunter is that guy, and he was hurt, and I understand some of the extenuating circumstances, but I think the recruiting has been good, which is why I give it a B, but I can't quite get it up to that A level yet because, at the end of the day, you have to get the results, and the results haven't been there. And I think that's in part just because of, a few mistakes and a few hits and misses with roster construction that have just kind of set the early part of his tenure back.
I think the outside shooting is the part that stands out to me. That knowing going into last season that was going to be an issue. Again, maybe Hunter was viewed as the answer to that. The Fitzner thing is difficult. I think with a lot of these grad transfers, it is a little bit of a crapshoot to assume that you're going to be able to get somebody and integrate them into what you want to do, particularly when you really haven't established that culture that we talked about in the last point of, what's this guy walking into? How do you really integrate him? I think that's challenging in any scenario. And I think it certainly proved to be very challenging in this one. And you ended up with a guy who was fairly one-dimensional in terms of what he was doing. And when that one dimension went away, he really became a struggle to play on the floor and do with those kinds of things. But I do, I think what I like, and I'm going to land probably at a B, about the same place that you would. I do like the kinds of guys that he's getting. I think Armand and Trace both seem like guys that fit well with what he wants to do. Brunk bringing in a guy who really cares about, wearing the IU jersey and playing really hard there. I think he's bringing in, you throw in Finney and, Hunter, from everything you hear about him, although you haven't seen it on the court. I like the kinds of guys he's getting. At some point that has to manifest itself in, the cultural things and winning and whatever else. But, so I don't know. I would, I'd probably go with a B. I think it's been good, but not great in the way that it was, a year ago.
Coach?
I'm a little bit higher on the recruiting. I'd say an A-, and looking at the big picture, 2 McDonald's All-Americans, several young men from Indiana, losing out to Kentucky and North Carolina is nothing to slough about when you're battling with that kind of opponent for players. I don't look at that as a negative at all. So I like the inside out. I do. And Andy said, I think the guys are Archie Miller guys. And going back to the culture thing a little bit too, as a coach, you can push buttons and push buttons and push buttons. But if the pieces don't respond, they hold some responsibility too for the culture. A coach cannot just wave a wand and have everyone on the same culture page. And it takes several years of recruiting in order to get that culture as well. So while I was lower than everyone on culture at a C-, that was more for in-season culture. But I think the recruiting has he said what he was going to do when he first took the job. He's going out and doing it. And here's the thing about recruiting that I love. He's patient. He's not going out trying to get the 9th grader, the 10th grader. Look at me, I'm offering 87 guys. He is really studying these guys. He's going out and maybe with like the Leo kid, maybe too patient. The Galloway kid.
Monday in-home visit coming up with Anthony.
Yeah, he's got an in-home visit. That. So I think that's probably his best aspect right now of all the things that we're looking at.
The next one's program ambassadorship. A little tricky to grade on this, and I think this is something that is never going to be Archie's strong suit. The best ambassadorship he'll have is just winning games, and then that will hopefully take care of itself. I think his public comments have been fine. They didn't, I don't know that they had the same impact this year during the losing streak, obviously, because there's really nothing a coach can say during the losing streak that sounds good. But he was, for the most part, how he was his first season. He's not someone who's going to go out of his way to really let people get to know him. There were a few instances of, some profiles of players and things like that. But I think overall, I would love to see Indiana be more open with the players so we can get to know them better. It just helps. It helps the fans have a better relationship with players. So I'm going to go with a C. But, he doesn't give us a ton to go on with this. He kind of does what's expected of him. But I do like that he does seem relatively candid when he's speaking. Like, it just seems like he says what he thinks, and I do appreciate that. So I'm going to go with a C, and maybe that's a little bit too harsh, but I think probably as long as we do this with him, program ambassadorship will probably get a C until we just start winning and we're all in a better mood. Andy, what do you think?
Yeah, this one is kind of hard. It's a little bit ambiguous, as you mentioned. I'd probably say a B, and maybe that's just a matter of like what your expectations are in that regard. Because I'm like you, I don't think that he's just not a rah-rah guy. I think you've seen kind of his general approach to that kind of thing already. And so I think based on what I expected, I'd probably say, B or so in that area, but I don't really have a strong feeling. I mean, I like the, kind of matter of fact, somewhat blunt nature in the way that he handles things, but I realize, some people need or want more than that, but I'd say probably a B. We don't have a place for like offense or defense on here. We might need to revise our report.
I mean, that's all kind of part of, I thought about that. That's kind of part of on-court success. I mean, maybe we need to shift up the criteria a little bit.
I don't know. Something for next year.
An A on
points that would have been good to make in the email exchange that we had earlier today.
Hey, I had a lot going on. Sorry.
Coach.
We get an A on free throw defense this year.
A plus.
A plus. I'm going to give a P for pass because I don't really care about ambassadorship. I like that he's a ball coach. I really do. And I want him to win so bad because, he's got to or he's not the guy. But every post game is the same thing. I know you have to be an ambassador for the program. You have to meet with the big wigs. You have to shake hands, go to golf outings and all that. But as a former head coach, now being an assistant coach, the best thing about being an assistant coach, you don't have to be an ambassador. You show up, do their job, and go home. And I think I like that about Archie. And so he passes because he does what he has to do, and he's never going to be great at it. But I'd rather have a winning coach and a winning program than someone that's not fun to hang out with, at the cash bar, than someone who is the life of the party.
Okay, final question here to wrap this up from Brendan. Do you feel more or less confident today that Archie is IU's long-term coach of the future than you did on the day he was hired? Andy?
I feel like it's a cop-out to say the same, but I don't.
No, it's a valid answer.
I don't know that I think it would be hard to say that you feel better based on what you've seen. I think at the end of last year, you might have said you felt better because, like I said, I felt like he got a lot out of the guys that were there last year, and I didn't leave this year feeling that way. But I also recognize that there were some somewhat odd circumstances from an injury standpoint. I think even having a one-and-done guy like Romeo that early in his tenure is an odd circumstance, not necessarily a bad one, but odd. So I'm kind of the same. Like
certainly
I said,
one he wanted. It's not like it was just
dropped in
his lap.
Yeah, no, I don't mean that at all. And I think the one that he had to, go after, as we've talked about before. So I'll say about the same. I definitely don't feel better, and I think you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who'd say they feel better. But I also don't know that I would say that I feel worse.
Coach,
if this may surprise some people, I'm a little less confident, and a little bit more. I think I'm less confident, and that's more of a reflection of me as a fan. That under the last coaching regime, we wanted things to be so much different, and we wanted it yesterday. And so the expectations that I had for Archie in year one and year two, I think probably were not attainable. And so now a little bit of doubt creeps in. And so that would fit into me, the less confident that he's the long-term. Do I still believe in Archie? Absolutely. Do I believe that he will get this fixed and will surprise people next year? Yes. But I'm a fan as much as I am analyst. So that has to come into play as well.
Yeah, I'm with you, Coach. I'm still confident in Archie, but less confident than on the day that he was hired. Just 2 years not making the tournament. Would have liked to see a little bit better results, even with all of the extenuating circumstances baked in. So still confident, still feeling good about it, but probably a little less than I was on the day he was hired and even at the end of last season, Andy, to your point. All right, coming up in our third segment, we are going to answer your questions, which include one about which of Indiana's 5 big men we feel most confident will be starting on opening night, and another about which restaurant is ideal for recruiting visits in Bloomington. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call. Talk about that next. That was a long segment. 22:41.
Yeah.
But we still have 11 minutes and 12 seconds for this one. So, how much does that give us, Andy?
Sorry, I was joking.
Oh, well.
Would you say 11, 12, and it's what, 36 seconds, something like that? That'd be 10:36.
10:36, you got it. Okay, 10:36.
Yeah, I do think, sorry I didn't reply, but I do think it would be at least to give some more clear avenue to break down like offense versus defense, because I think if that's all rolled into on-court stuff, there's a lot of things that go into that you're trying to, because I kind of put player development in there too, like you're trying to shoehorn a bunch of stuff in there.
Would we all feel different if the number of losses came spread out instead of 12 out of 13?
Yeah, and but the end result is the same. Still make the NIT.
The end result was the same. Our defense got better. We made the NIT in year 2.
And all the games were the same. Like Nebraska was still a no-show. Yeah, I think we probably would feel a little bit. Like there's an emotional toll, a scar from losing 12 out of 13 that is different than if it's spread out. I don't know that it would be a lot because the bottom line is still the bottom line, but that's a scarring, 5 weeks to go through, I think.
I agree, because you focus on 12 out of 13 and no one ever says they won 12 out of 14 to start.
Yeah.
So that and the other thing that I'm okay with, not okay, I don't like not being in a tournament, but again, I hate making excuses, but the injuries were unbelievable. Unbelievable from the start of the year to the very end was just unbelievable. So I don't know how to judge Archie because of that.
Mm-hmm. I think how
much of that is his issues.
Yeah, I think the flip side of the losing streak in the middle is that then you saw them kind of flip a switch a little bit, at least until the Big Ten tournament. And in some ways, does that give you more confidence that, as you said during your part about culture, like you finally got to a point where saying like, hey, this is it. Does that give you more confidence that for the most part, they responded to that, had that setback against Ohio State, but then played pretty well in the NIT. I don't know. It's a hard season to make heads or tails of, I feel like, versus the one prior. While it was disappointing, I think you could look back in hindsight and say, yeah, we really overshot what realistic expectations were by a pretty wide mark. And once you really saw what the team was, but you could still see the building blocks of what was there. I think this year just feels like a year kind of like stuck in limbo where you didn't really drop back and kind of, I don't know, you didn't drop back, but you didn't really move forward either. You just kind of like hung out for a year, and then now, this year I think will be potentially more telling.
Maybe this is a segment for another summer show or something. If everyone was healthy, how many games change? Because we were 1 or 2 games away, as it was, with 7 injuries and people out, of making the NCAA tournament. If we, let's say, instead of 17 and 15, we were 19 and 13 and had a whole roster, and we go and we're a 9 seed or a 10 seed.
Well, everybody feels better, but you can't. You got to play the hand you're dealt, though. I think everybody understands that injuries are a thing, but then you would also have to follow that up with, do all the other teams in the country get their injured players back? Does Michigan State have Joshua Langford for the 2 games we play against them?
Oh, I agree, but our numbers were more than just Josh Langford.
Yeah. No, I know. I mean,
5 people at one time out of the second 5 was out.
I think most reasonable IU fans recognize that if the injury situation had just been normal this year, this team would have made the NCAA tournament. Like, I don't think that is a controversial statement at all. Yeah. That said, you gotta you get the team that you have every game, and you have to make the most of it. And I also think it's reasonable to say more could have been made with what was there. Like, there was still enough to make the NCAA tournament by getting a win against Northwestern or a win against Nebraska. So
I don't totally disagree, but I also think, man, that's a nightmare situation for a staff.
Yeah,
what Indiana went through, and then you had players who were playing, like with the thumb injury for Romeo that we really didn't know about. I mean, not just the players out; it just seemed like everything that could happen.
Yeah, and, again, the way that this is a weird season, because the way that we view it is not going to be written until 5 years from now. Like, this season was either the beginning of the end for Archie Miller, or it's something that, when we've made 2 Final Fours and won a Big Ten, that we're like, man, Archie really learned something from that season. Boy, everything really went wrong. Look at how good we've been the last 5 years. Clearly, if we'd had, so like, we just won't know. I mean, we're sitting here trying to analyze it now in the off season, and it's going to take. True. We're just going to have to get away from this season to understand it. I think.
I agree. That's a great point.
Okay, so let's answer some questions. So I want to do, which ones of these do you guys think are the best ones? I thought this poll question that we had in the community was kind of interesting, and I wanted to hit that. And I definitely want to do Joel's question about the restaurants. So I definitely want to do that one. Bunch of Justin Smith questions, so we kind of hit that.
The one about how much he'll play the 3. I mean, I don't know if it's percent of minutes. I don't really know how to answer it that way, but I do think it might be a good one to piggyback on the kind of the post player one. Just because I think
he's going to have to play it some if he's going to get on the court a lot.
Well, that's what I would say. So I think
if he's going to do that, he better be able to shoot and handle the ball. So. All right, let's do that one.
Yeah, let's at least do those. That one about the offensive philosophy is interesting, but I just don't know how much I would gauge that based on how much time we actually have.
Maybe we move that to next week. Maybe we use that question to do a breakdown of the offense and defense next week, because a lot of people ask about that, and we didn't really get to that with our criteria this week. So we can do a part 2 next week, breaking down the offense and defense.
Okay, that's
probably a good thing to do.
Yeah, if we need another one besides the ones that we were there, because there's another offense question too.
Yeah, and that way we can get Ryan's input on it too, because I think he'll be back next week.
Yeah.
So let's.
I mean, I could take or leave his input on it, but whatever,
Come on, dude.
The dude that the Steelers drafted, that the linebacker. Like, he had on the weirdest looking suit. I don't even know that you can call it a suit. It was very strange. Jen was like texting me from upstairs. She's like, "Did you see this guy?" I'm like, "No, I'm not watching this." But then she sent me a picture of it. It was insane. So,
all right. I did not see that.
Yeah, it's interesting. And then Christian Wilkins tried to do like a flying like chest and shoulder bump with Goodell as he was coming onto the stage, and Goodell was having no part of it because he probably would have been killed.
Goodell. All right. Here we go. Here we go. Welcome back to the Assembly Call. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and the coach Brian Tonsoni. Remember that you need to be subscribed to our email newsletter. We send out a weekly IU news roundup. Even during the offseason and after every game, we send out a detailed post-game analysis.
There's a high-level operation going on out there.
Just text IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. That's IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com.
Make no excuses.
All right, it is time now for our mailbag. All of these questions submitted via our private IU basketball discussion community, which you can learn more about at assemblycall.com/community or via Twitter. Guys, I wanted to ask you guys one of the poll questions that we used inside the community this week, because I thought it was an interesting one. Now that Joey Brunk is here, which one of these players do you feel most confident will be in the starting lineup on opening night of the 2019-20 season? And what is your reasoning for that? So Deron Davis, Joey Brunk, Trace Jackson Davis, Race Thompson, and Justin Smith. Because I think there are reasonable arguments for every guy about why he could or may not end up in the starting lineup, at least at the start of the season. And how Archie mixes and matches those different options and their strengths and weaknesses is going to be really interesting to watch throughout the season. Coach, who do you think is most likely? Who do you have the most confidence in to be in the starting lineup on opening night?
Most confidence for me probably be Trace because he's a McDonald's All-American. Whether that's at the 4 or the 5 is something that I'll have to think about. But I think he's going to be like Romeo, come in and be a starter from the start, and even Finney. I think that's an Archie guy. I think he's going to be in the starting lineup somewhere, depending maybe at the 5 if he can guard the 4, maybe at the 4.
Andy?
Yeah, I would say Trace as well. I think the reasons the coach said, Deron, I mean, unfortunately, you just never know from a health perspective. But I just think Trace gives a guy who can really hopefully picks up the defense quickly, but I think a guy who can really perform well with the kinds of things that Archie wants them to do defensively, whether that's ball screen coverages, protecting the rim, things like that. And I think he gives good rebounder and a guy that can play inside. So I would say him first and Deron second for me.
Yeah, see, I went with Deron first. I mean, the question for me with Deron is just, health, injury stuff, that kind of thing. But I think if he's healthy as a senior, having been in the system now for a few years, we know what he can do offensively. I like all the, what you guys said about Trace, but also he's a freshman. And if he struggles to pick up the defense, maybe they bring him along a little bit slower. So those two are the guys to me that I would put first and second, but I have a little bit more confidence in Deron, even with kind of the injury, just those issues, just because he's a senior and has been around longer. And to me, I would think that would kind of win out or kind of tip the balance at the end. It may end up being both of them in the starting lineup, but I would have more confidence in Deron.
I was going to say, yeah, I would tend to think they both will be there, but yeah, go ahead, Coach.
There's a columnist that said something about Trace and Joey Brunk playing ahead of Deron. I forget who that was, but I saw that on one of the sites where the question was asked, of those three, who do you think is going to play? And it was Trace, Brunk, and then Davis, according to this columnist. Now, I don't know.
They'll let anybody write stuff online.
True. But that was interesting if you go from the offensive stance of Brunk too in his offensive production. But we mentioned in a previous show that the defensively is the difference for Deron. I think it just depends on Deron's health.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so let's take this question then, which kind of goes along with this, because none of us said Justin Smith. What percentage of Justin Smith's minutes do you think he'll play the 3? Because this, to me, is one of the big, two of the big swing questions for this season are, is Jerome Hunter healthy? Because if he is, I think we all project him to be a guy that's playing a lot of minutes. And is Justin Smith able to play the 3? Because if he can play the 3, Archie's going to have so much more flexibility roster-wise in terms of getting his most talented players on the court. But if Justin, can't shoot, can't dribble and is relegated to playing the 4, you've really got that logjam where it's going to be hard to get those guys maybe as many minutes as they deserve or as many minutes as you'd want. So, what do you think, Andy? I mean, how many of Justin's minutes do you think will need to come there at the 3, and how important is that for him to be able to do that?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important because if you look, last year they basically got themselves into a position where they didn't have a ton of depth in the backcourt, but they also didn't have enough guys that they trusted in the front court to be able to slide him over to that spot. And also, I think, didn't have confidence in his ability to, make shots and be able to space the floor from that position as well. So you ended up playing essentially 3 guards on a team that you didn't really have, that maybe had 4. So I think it becomes incredibly important for he or Hunter in some capacity to be able to play the 3. Because I think it gives you a little more size. I think he's certainly a guy who can we've seen flashes of defensively and could guard different positions. So I think those are 2 guys that really give you size, but you're not getting that size at the expense of being able to defend if he's able to do that. But that to me hinges a whole lot on his ability to be able to step out and make shots, because of the other guys that we've talked about in the front court, any of the guys that were just discussed in that, none of them is thought of in any way as a guy who can step out and knock down shots. I know, I think it was Rab Johns on the Hoosier Hysterics podcast said he thinks Trace will be able to shoot it a little bit better than people think now, but he's not going to be stepping out and making threes, is my understanding. So you can't have 3 non-shooters on the floor clogging up the lane at this point. So to me, the number of minutes he plays at the 3 is directly dependent on his ability to improve his 3-point shot.
And that's where race could complicate things in a good way if the 3-point shooting that we saw in high school translates to the college game. Now he becomes an interesting piece who could potentially play the 4 and space things a little bit offensively. But we need to see it in games. He took 1 or 2 threes last year and looked completely uncomfortable doing so. Anything to add on that, Coach? I
think Justin can guard the 3. I just don't think he's a great fit offensively, even if he improves, and I expect him to improve. I think he's just a 4 in college, and he needs to improve in order to play the 4. What percentage of minutes will he see at the 4 if he doesn't improve his offensive game? I think if the other guys come in and can guard like he can, then it's going to come down to offense even at the 4 spot.
Yep. Okay, let's get to this question. This is from Joel. Love this question. So Archie has taken recruits to Zagreb's, Knicks, and is now taking Lester Quinones to Buffalo's. All 3 are great, but which place would you suggest to be the primary go-to place for IU basketball recruits? Coach, why don't you go first on this one?
Is there a D, all of the above in the same visit?
Take them to all those places?
That's my tough decision every time I go to Bloomington. Which one of those 3 am I going to go to and miss out then for another 2 weeks? I'd have to say Knicks, just from the tradition and the variety of food for a young man. It's not a heavy sit-down steak dinner, and then wings are all over the place, even though Buffalo's are far superior. So Knicks is unique to the campus, and we want someone who understands the importance of Knicks.
Yeah, see, now look, I should say, and maybe this goes for all of us, when I go back to Bloomington, I go to my old favorite, so I haven't really experienced a lot of the new restaurants, and so there may be some of those out there, and so if you're shouting those at your radio or at your headphones right now that we're not saying them, just understand, that we haven't, we tend to go to the same places when we go back, and maybe we should branch out.
I know, but you only have a finite number of meals when you're there for a short period of time. So you're trying to make sure that A, you go to the other places, and B, you don't waste one of those meals in some place that doesn't turn out to be as good.
I know. Although, really, we should just ask Galen, because he won't steer us wrong. Galen and Megan. We can ask those 2. They'll send us to the right places. I'm going to go – well, first, here's what I would say. You got to know the guy. So it's a sales trip. You tailor the trip to the guy. And so you try to kind of understand what he's about, what the family's about. If the family is maybe, very serious and they're not about tomfoolery, Coach, maybe you don't go to Knicks. So number one thing is you tailor it to the family. For me, I would default to Zagreb's. And it's hard for me to think outside of that because it's where we always go. The food is obviously great. And when my dad was coaching, under Mallory football-wise, we always took the football recruits there. So I had all these memories, going with him on those trips. And so that place just feels like a recruiting spot to me. So I would go with that. I know it's, kind of a cliched answer, but there's a reason why they take guys there because it's always a great experience and a great meal. So that's going to be my vote. Andy, are you gonna go off the board here with one that we haven't mentioned yet?
No, but I did really enjoy Nate. I think Ebel is the last name, or Ebel. He replied to the tweet with the question of East Side Chili's. So that was a, unconventional choice for sure. But
no offense to Chili's.
I did have a good, yes, I had a good laugh about that one, though. That was good. Now, I would probably lean Zagreb's as well. I think Nick's, it's hard for me to separate the fact that, like, when I go to Nick's, I want to sit there and hang out and drink a beer, and you're not really doing that with the recruit, ideally.
Ideally.
Yeah, well, or maybe you are. I don't know. So that one kind of makes Nick's a little bit hard for me. I struggled to separate that. So I would almost say, like, Zagreb's would be a good place to go. But you can make the argument for Buffalo's as a place that maybe they're more likely to actually go if they would be on campus. That might actually be the most likely place that they would actually go and eat, as opposed to going to Zagreb's. But I would probably lean Zagreb's like you. Now, if they were taking me out somewhere, then it would definitely be Nick's.
Yes.
That's it. We're done. No more questions.
Okay, well, that is going to have to do it for this week's show. If you want to see us do the show live, you can join us
and the chat mob
at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. And you can always subscribe to our podcast by searching for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Thank you for listening. We will be back again with you next Thursday night for another edition of Assembly Call Radio. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. There were some other good options here that people were saying in the chat. Someone said Nick's has food, ? Nick's has good food.
Someone said they ate at Nick's once, but they can't remember. That's
That's
awesome.
true.
That was a
Cafe
great
Pizzeria. Yeah,
I think that was at the top of Galen's extensive pizza rankings of Bloomington, was it not?
I think
when he
so.
put out like that manifesto some years ago.
He takes it very seriously, and I appreciate him for that. Kent asked if I'm going to watch the recruits this weekend in Dallas. I need to do it at some point. I'm probably not going to, just because we have family stuff planned all weekend. And I tend in the off season to always let family stuff trump potential basketball things. And it just always ends up that we have family stuff. So I need to try and plan ahead a little bit better and, block that out with do yard work on the thing and then just kind of slip out when no one is looking for me. But no, I will not be able to go. Family stuff takes precedent. I would love to, because I'd love to see Leland Galloway and those guys in person, but it's not going to happen this year. So, I got to bank lots of goodwill in the off season for when the season starts. So that's how this thing works.
Both you guys with the families at home. I'm the. You thank me for always being
Coach
around.
might fly down.
Yeah, he hadn't thought about it till right now, and it just came up. But he's like, "Yeah, I can do it."
Yeah,
I'm like, "I got
I'll hop on a plane.
I got 4 soccer games to go to this week, and I can't go."
There's gonna be like 10 episodes now this season where it's just Coach hosting by himself.
I think I need to tape some remote drops from my discussions with Joel and David and Richie at the baseball games. Now we have like Assembly Call light I think the baseball fans look at us like we're weird. We're watching a baseball game and we talk for 2 hours about basketball. It's really cool.
Man, the baseball team's good too.
Yep, I'll be down tomorrow night. I'm taking my youngest son. He turned 21 a couple weeks ago. We're going to the Bluebird to
nice.
See a concert tomorrow night, so I get to act young again.
Very nice.
Wait, who are you seeing?
Clayton Anderson, country
Oh,
guy.
I think you told me that before.
Yeah,
When we were
one of our
there, you said you were
favorites.
going down.
Ooh, Kent's going to be at the EYBL in Georgia. You'll have to give us a report, Kent. Maybe if you're going to be around after that, maybe you can hop on the show and give us a report of guys.
Kent, watch your feet so you don't stub your toes on the bags of cash sitting around. That's a
Bags of cash. Bags of cash.
We also need player comps for everyone that you see. It's important.
I hate player comps.
He hates them. All right. Fun show, gents. Good to be back. Good to be back, everybody. We'll be back next week, and have a good week until then. And watch out, Monday is going to be interesting. In-home visit with Anthony Leal. Do you think he offers him? And do you think it's contingent on how well Leal plays this weekend, or do you think that decision's already been made?
I would think it's already been made. I like to think that those kinds of decisions are not made based on one weekend of basketball anymore.
Yeah, so it was done that way at one time.
That's why that last word is really important in that scenario.
Yeah,
I know most of us don't like the early offers, but it almost seems a little late. He's next year, 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Does that seem late, or am I
it's
just
no? It's
something?
been. I mean, it's one of those things because he's local and because for a long time, at least from what you hear, it kind of felt like he would like say yes on the spot. It is probably a little bit late, especially now that other schools are coming in. So we might have missed out on like offering and him just saying yes on the spot. But late is kind of relative. I mean, if you're not convinced, like I think we should take him, right? He's from Bloomington. The kid can shoot. Like those two things, I think even if there are other warts in his game, let's find a way to make it work with that guy. I just think that fits. And I forgot I was actually going to use that. I was going to talk about that in a banner moment. Like think of the last two guys we had from Bloomington that were scholarship. Like the last two great Indiana teams had scholarship players from Bloomington, Indiana. Jared Jeffries, Jordan Hulse. I'm not saying he's those guys, but I feel like you try to make it work with that guy. But there are reasonable people who wonder if he's, if some of the other parts of his game are going to be good enough at this level. And I've heard varying opinions from a lot of different people who've seen him play. I don't know. I've never seen him play. But from what I know, I think we should make it work with that guy. It just seems...
tape is weird. You got to see people live. His release looked a little slow on the tape that I saw.
Yeah.
And that I don't know if that correlates. Again, if you're open and people can drive, you can take all time if you hit them. The same issue when I saw Galloway in the state finals. I didn't know he had a hand injury, but he was missing free throws, and it didn't look like his shot was there. And now he's healed and shooting well in the AAU. So you just wonder if, and that's where you got to trust a guy like Archie. He's got to win. He wants to win. He's not going to just offer guys that are in Indiana because they're in Indiana. Maybe the Morton kid's better or someone else is better in that class. And
I mean, the thing is, like, it's real easy to say, like, why hasn't Archie offered him? I've kind of taken the mindset, again, like I know kind of what I want, but it's almost just more like the romantic version of how IU basketball could be, right? But it is so obvious that you offer that guy. Why aren't they? Like, there's got to be a reason. They're not just going to actively not recruit a guy from Bloomington to, like, spite him or something. So there's got, like, for some reason, they just haven't been convinced yet that he's at that level, and they've got some other guys they're targeting higher in the class. So it's that balancing act.
Who's offered him? Anyone big?
I think Stanford has. I think Xavier has. Virginia has shown interest. I don't know if they've offered.
So we're not the only ones. Purdue hasn't offered. Notre Dame hasn't offered. Anyone in state hasn't offered. I
don't know about
nature,
that.
Right?
I don't know about that. I would have to look. I don't know if they're. It's sometimes difficult to parse whether there's actually been an offer and whether they visited.
Right.
But I know he visited Stanford.
Some people are saying Northwestern and Butler might have.
Yeah, Northwestern did. Northwestern did. That's right. Yep. So, like, again, I don't think it's a slam dunk, but I don't know. I think at the end of the day, yeah, Iowa did too. It seems like that's a guy that you got 13 scholarships. It seems like you could fill one with a guy who can shoot that's from your hometown, warts and all.
We took a guy who could shoot from Crown Point, though, too.
Well, I think he's a better player than that.
No, I know, but you just got to be careful.
No, I appreciate the patience, but you can be too patient. And if you miss out on a guy who really could have helped you and he's right there in your backyard, that exacerbates it. I mean, there's no
Klein, Kyle Guy.
Yeah.
Trevin blew it when he went through.
Yeah, so be interesting to see what they do, but be on the watch for that Monday.
All right. Chat Mob, come see me at the baseball game tomorrow.
Yeah, go see Coach. Send pictures. Andy, have the Eagles picked?
No, they're not till 25. I think we've still got a little while left. They're only in pick 18.
Such drama.
Oh, yeah. Good times. Eagles want to trade down, so I fully believe that I'll sit here, stay up, wait, and then they'll trade out of the first round, and then I can just go to bed.
Go to bed. You need sleep.
I know. I sound terrible. I think I got.
We want you to live.
Hannah's coldest, so now I sounded really bad this morning. I was a little concerned I wouldn't be able to do the show.
Well, you soldiered through. We appreciate it.
Good night, everyone. Thanks again, gentlemen.
Right.
Appreciate it.
No, thank you.
Welcome to the show officially, Coach.
Thanks again.
Thank you. That was the easiest question Jared's ever asked me about anything with the show. And I actually responded to that, unlike the rundown for the show today. So.
Yeah, we won't tell you what Ryan's response was because we don't want there to be any chemistry issues here on the show.
He just said as long as he hosts before I do. That's why I'm voting yes.
Yeah,
I really don't like
already
it.
Happened,
but he can host.
It did already happen. God, that's sad. That is so sad. I would be embarrassed if I was
I know how that vote went down right there. It's all right.
All right.
All right. See you guys.
All right. Later.
Bye, everybody.